Thank you very much, Doron. Good evening. Ramadan Kareem. Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. Welcome, dear friends from near and far. I'm very pleased to be here as a moderator of a conversation that we began last year during Ramadan, and I want to thank our distinguished guests for agreeing to come back together. I know you two are often in conversation, but we often don't get to be flies on the wall. And so thank you so much, both of you, for your generosity. I would like to introduce our conversation partners. I will introduce both of you, and then we will start our conversation. Tonight we are speaking about sacred journeys and the interesting and eye-opening comparison between Ramadan and counting of the Omer. Our first guest, a dear friend of the National Library, is Yossi Klein Halevi. He is senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. Halevi co-directs the Institute's Muslim Leadership Initiative, which teaches emerging young Muslim American leaders about Judaism, Jewish identity, and Israel. Over 150 Muslim leaders have participated in this unique program. Halevi's 2013 book, Like Dreamers, won the Jewish Book Council's Everett Book of the Year Award. His latest book, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, is a New York Times bestseller. Halevi has written for leading op-ed pages in North Africa and is a former contributing editor to the New Republic. He's frequently quoted on Israeli, Middle Eastern, and Jewish affairs in leading media around the world, and is one of the best-known lecturers on Israeli issues in the American Jewish community and on North American campuses. Halevi is the recipient of the 2019 Figure of Reconciliation Award of the Polish Council of Christians and Jews. Born in Brooklyn, Halevi received his BA in Jewish Studies from Brooklyn College and MS in Journalism from Northwestern University. He moved to Israel in 1982 and lives in Jerusalem with his wife, Sarah, who helps direct a Center for Jewish Meditation, and they have 3 children. Welcome, Yossi. Our second guest is our dear friend, Imam Abdullah Antepli, who is a fellow on Jewish-Muslim relations at the Shalom Hartman Institute and co-director of the Muslim Leadership Initiative. He is on faculty at both Duke University's Sanford School of Public Policy and Duke Divinity School, where from 2008 to 2014, he served as the university's first Muslim chaplain, one of only a handful of full-time Muslim chaplains at U.S. colleges and universities. Antapli was recently recognized as one of the most influential Muslims in U.S. higher education by the nonprofit Times. In his multiple roles at Duke, Imam Abdullah engages students, faculty, and staff across and beyond campuses through seminars, panels, and other avenues to provide a Muslim voice and perspective to the discussions of faith, spirituality, social justice, and more. Imam Abdullah also serves as a faculty member in the Duke Divinity School, teaching courses on Islam and Muslim cultures. From 1996 to 2003, Imam Abdullah worked on a variety of faith-based humanitarian and relief projects in Myanmar and Malaysia with the Association of Social and Economic Solidarity with Pacific Countries. He then served as the first Muslim chaplain at Wesleyan University and subsequently as the Associate Director of the Islamic Chaplaincy Program and Interfaith Relations, and an adjunct faculty member of Hartford Seminary in Connecticut. Imam Abdullah is the founder and executive board member of the Association of College Muslim Chaplains and a board member of the Association for College and University Religious Affairs. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Ramadan Kareem to you all.
So our subject is ethereal and even a little mystical, but we exist in the world of complexity. And especially here in Jerusalem today and this week and this month has been a time of real physical and political complexity. And I understand that you would like to begin, before we start our conversation, about Ramadan and the Omer to start there. And so I want to invite you, Yossi, to open our evening with some personal remarks.
So first of all, hello everyone. Good afternoon. And Raquel, thank you so much for once again bringing us together in this format. Abdullah, I want to say to you how deeply grateful, especially on this hard day, that we can be in a warm and loving conversation, which is so countercultural to what's happening literally outside my window.
Yossi, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but some audience members are having a hard time hearing you. So if you could talk more directly into the mic, then we are all eager to hear what you're saying.
I said that I'm deeply grateful to Abdullah for having this loving conversation, which is really counterintuitive to what's happening in the city. And you know, when Raquel, when you wished us all a happy Jerusalem Day, something in me resisted it. I love Jerusalem passionately. Jerusalem is my home. Jerusalem is my spiritual vision. And yet today is not a joyful day in Jerusalem. And it's not the topic for our conversation, so I won't go into details, but I do want to say to you, Abdullah, and to everyone else who's participating, that what is happening here is not my vision. And my dream of Jerusalem is that the Jewish people will know how to be sovereign in the city in the spirit of generosity, in the spirit of wisdom, not from a place of defensiveness, and which sometimes comes as aggression. And we see that in various expressions during this day. And I'm certainly not absolving the Palestinians of their share of violence, but we are the sovereigns here. We are the power and the responsibility.
Thank you, my holy brother. I also do very much appreciate the reality that we are able to create against all odds, especially during difficult days like this. And it only makes everything that we are trying to do together and similar initiatives much more urgently needed, much more holy, much more sacred. It's way too easy and cheap to go back to everybody on their own base, their own corner, and repeat the simplistic arguments. Yeah, I love Jerusalem too, as you know. I'm in love with that city. I was there 2 years ago for Ramadan. For the first time, I experienced the whole Ramadan. And it's amazing how beautiful it was and how grateful I was. I was applauding Israeli government's grown, really admirable understanding of what Ramadan means for Palestinians, for Muslims. They were busing people from West Bank. They were facilitating, even putting a lot of difficulty on the West Jerusalem residents to accommodate the religious and spiritual needs of the people, which was incredible. But as you know, things go up and down. It was that's what my vision of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. It was always meant to be a house of worship and prayer. It was always meant to be a window, an exemplary picture of ethical, moral coexistence, or al-Quds, as we say in Arabic, purity, sanctity. It's hard to see that sanctity and purity in all ways and all others. And you said you expect Israel as the state and government to act as a more generous partner. And I also echo you and applaud you for that invitation. I also invite my fellow Muslims to also act in the spirit of generosity and not politicize Aqsa, not politicize further sacred times and sacred places, even if when and if they feel right. If you politicize all the time and use nerve centers of our spiritual places to make a political point, you may win some political scores in the short run, but in the long run, it is only poisoning the well of Jewish-Muslim relations and the Middle East. So much unwise, ill-willed leadership, religious, political, on all fronts is going there. So on this Jerusalem day, in the last few remaining days of Ramadan, in the holiest days of Islamic calendar, at the holiest side of Islam, to be confronted by this ugly reality, un-Jerusalemite reality, is very heartbreaking. So without acknowledging that, I think going into spiritual and mystical realms wouldn't be at least honest. Raquel, thank you very much to you and the National Library of Israel for giving us that space to express these difficult moments and recognize difficulties that we are facing. You are muted.
Thank you both. As we shift to talking about our subject at hand, the subject itself is a nexus of the practical and the spiritual, and the very nature of time and counting. That's a very grounded framework for higher order ideas and ideals. Before I start with our first question, I want to recognize and appreciate the support and generosity of the Russell Berry Foundation, who contributed to our Ramadan Nights from Jerusalem initiative and to enable this event. And it was in tribute to you both, and in particular to honor you, Imam Abdullah, during Ramadan, because it is not at all obvious that you join in conversation in this framework of the National Library of Israel, and that you share of your time and your friendship and your thoughts. And so
thank you, Raquel, for recognizing this. I cannot tell you how much pushback, even my close friends, my allies, they said you shouldn't be on this day, at this moment. It will be further unwise. You will be further attacked. I don't think that way. I think it's even more morally imperative. It has more moral weight for me to be in this conversation with my holy brother, my partner in this work. It is all the things that we are doing is to see if it can survive during these moral stress tests. And so I'm really grateful to be here.
So with that, I want to start us off with the subject at hand, and if you can explain why you put together the month of Ramadan and the counting of the Omer. The month of Ramadan, for those who have less background in Islam, is often likened to the holidays of Tishrei and the high holidays, the Yamim Noraim, in terms of the time in the calendar of the most intensive spiritual practice and religious practice. I think this is a first to connect Ramadan to the counting of the Omer. And so let's start there. Yossi, do you want to start us off?
When my holier brother and I were conceiving this program, we realized that first of all, there's the obvious overlap at this particular moment between these two admittedly very different forms of religious expression. Raquel, you made the point in one of our conversations that Ramadan is the most intense time of the Muslim year. And the Omer, while being significant, certainly for those of us who observe it, doesn't have anywhere near that comparable weight. And so there is a certain asymmetry in this comparison, but we felt nevertheless that it was worth pursuing because both of these experiences are journeys in time, and they both take place over a relatively long period of time. You know, most holidays are over. So Jewish holidays can go on for a while, but after a week, you're pretty much done. Unless you live in the diaspora, you drag it into the second week. But okay, you know, here in Israel, within 7 days, you're finished, even with the most arduous holidays. When it comes to counting the Omer, we go on with this, and we go on and on. You know, it's 2 months of counting. And you are entering into a consciousness of a particular moment, and you're prolonging that experience. And if you're doing the counting of the Omer in a way that I believe it was intended for, you are going inward in a way that the each day is different from the day before. And it is not a rote experience. And I know from my conversations over the years with Abdullah that Ramadan is very much in that line of experience.
Very much so. I think one of the very profound similarities between Judaism and Islam is their spiritual practices are not to take the believers to faraway God. So there are so many spiritual practices, they see God as on the mountaintop reality that you have to climb to reach God. Whereas what I see, there's a profound and central Jewish and Muslim voices in our scripture, is that God is within. In the Quran, there's a verse that says, God is closer to you than your own jugular vein. So reaching God, inviting God's presence into your life is not an external journey, but an internal one. You jump onto these escalators and make aliyah, try to reach out to the heavens, but internally through inward journey. And that's the Ramadan on one foot. This whole month, all the practices, all the rigor, all the spiritual disciplines. Yes, Yossi, puts 1 day a year fasting Jews and the Christians who give up chocolate and Diet Coke during Lent. That rigor makes them feel like a chopped liver, correct. But in one foot, it is to jump onto these Ramadan escalators and try to reach to God, which is already close to us, just working with our own decoding mechanisms, which is working within ourselves to feel the presence of God and sustaining that presence of God in our individual and collective lives. And in that, I think there's an incredible similarity between Ramadan and the counting of the Omer.
So once you put this in front of me, this juxtaposition, and I started thinking about it, I realized that this comparison helped me see something that I wasn't paying attention to. And I think that's always the value of doing comparative analysis, that the juxtaposition illuminates. And what this juxtaposition illuminates for me is that these times, which you can see as a monolith, a month, 7 weeks, and especially when it comes to the Omer, which seems at surface to be the same. You know, you're counting, it breaks down for the OCD among us. It's, you know, becomes this mathematical exercise. But those people who don't observe Ramadan can see it as 1 month. And what the juxtaposition, illuminates is that within this external structure of the month, the 7 weeks, there's actually difference, and there's actually a journey and a process. And so I want to invite you, Imam Abdullah, if you would talk a little bit about what is the actual journey within this month of Ramadan? How is it broken down?
There are 3 stages of Ramadan. If I may very quickly provide that the 3 stages, there are so many verses of the Holy Quran and the famous hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and all the prophets before him, says Ramadan is a journey in 3 stages. The first stage is mercy and gratitude. So believers are invited really intensely, focusing on the last 11 months and all the years before, to see if there is enough mercy, if their mercy index, if I can use that market term, if they score at least C plus B minus. So it requires, it's amazing. It's the genius of Islam. Every ritual, Taraweeh evening prayers, and the spiritual disciplines is basically invites you, Americans know this, around April, everybody goes through their books. because they're going to pay tax. So you go through your spiritual books, look at your past to see if there is mercy and gratitude, thankfulness. Are you a person of shukr? Are you part of Ahl shukr? Are you people of gratitude and thankfulness? And I can give more details, but I don't want to. Does every Muslim do it? Do they understand the ethical, moral teaching behind every ritual? Whenever I go to a Yom Kippur service, I lose my mind how beautiful it is. But I also see, like many Muslims, many Jews are just going through the motions and they are not always understanding. But if you really understand Ramadan practices, first 10 days you focus on, are you a grateful person? Are you grateful to God vertically? And then Prophet Muhammad said it more than 10 times in different parts of the hadith literature. Do you want to see or understand? Do you really want to verify if you are thankful to God? See if you are thankful to your fellow human being. So there's an incredibly close correlation that you want to understand if you are grateful to God. See if you're a grateful person for your fellow human being, people who carry you to where you are. So the first stage, the first journey is focusing on this gratitude and mercy. In English, they don't come together, but in Arabic and Muslim languages, rahmah and shukr are just inseparable realities. You can only be grateful if there is enough mercy, if there is compassion, if there is enough level of motherly love towards other people, towards yourself, toward God in you. The second stage is maghfirah, the forgiveness. The second stage is, again, you focus on your past. Do you have so many mistakes and failures last 11 months since the last Ramadan? All the patterns of failure in sinning, in making mistakes, vertically between you and God and horizontally with your fellow human being. Again, the same ethical moral teaching that the Prophet Muhammad says, do you want to see if you will be forgiven by God? Do you think you deserve God's forgiveness? See if you are a forgiving person to your fellow human being. If you are gracious enough to go beyond the level of forgiveness. And God knows in this bickery and the ugly reality of Jerusalem now, how much we need that forgiveness to one another, to each other, to ourselves. So you, again, continue to work on patterns of mistakes, especially repeated offenses that we have gone through. You are very good with money, but when it comes to lying, you keep failing. Or when it comes to hurting people's feelings, you keep failing. So you really look for the patterns of failure and ask forgiveness vertically from your Lord, from your God, and then horizontally with your fellow human beings. And then the third stage is now you turn your face to future. Enough of working on your past. And then the third stage is hidayah. Raquel, you know these words and you know how much theological weight, moral weight these Arabic terms, Quranic terms carry. It literally means guidance. Now that you understood where your pluses or minuses are in the gratitude and mercy department, your index is clear, and then you give yourself a great report about forgiveness, and you see how much more you need to go in that area. Then you turn your face to God, your soul to God in the last 10 days. This is exactly what we should be doing in all the practicing of these spiritual disciplines that we take on. You ask for guidance. You now see, what do you need? What kind of empowerment? What kind of inspiration? What kind of protection? Where do you need God putting safety trails on your path so that you are not going to go astray? Where do you need a little bit of encouragement? Where do you see yourself being swallowed or enveloped by the powerful forces of despair and hopelessness? Where do you see yourself being pulled down? And then you say, it's not in my hands, Almighty. I need in these areas empowerment, inspiration, protection, encouragement, and lifting up. And that's exactly what Ramadan tells us. Also, a three-part journey that you spend 2/3 of it on your past, 1/3 of it trying to at least next 11 months until the next Ramadan comes, a map, a GPS journey that you can do this better than the last year.
And so instead of a month, we're talking about a very elaborate stage journey. Yossi, where does this meet you and how you think about Sfirat Omer, the counting of the Omer?
It uncannily overlaps with certainly my personal experience of the Omer and what I think the Omer is supposed to be about. When we think about a journey, spiritual or otherwise, a journey has three components. There's a starting point, there's the journey itself, and there's the destination. And the starting point is Pesach, is Passover, and the end point is Shavuot, and that in itself is a message of the consciousness that the Omer is trying to imbue, which is that you are moving from that initial outbreak of freedom, which is Pesach, to the moment of revelation, of accepting God's law, of accepting discipline, and also experiencing the awe of God's presence. And so the starting point is physical freedom. The end point, I would say, is really spiritual freedom, because in religious understanding, and I think this is true, Abdullah, for all the great faiths, spiritual discipline actually leads to greater freedom, because you learn to control your lower instincts. And you try to free yourself of habits. The journey itself is very much the experience that you're describing, Abdullah. And that is that each day in the counting of the Omer has a particular quality to it. And the counting of the Omer is probably the most overtly Kabbalistic of any of our Jewish experiences in time. Each day is given an explicit sphira, a sphere and an interaction of two sphirot. I won't go into the whole description. As you know, Abdullah, Judaism is complicated, and each day has its own combination of divine emanations, divine qualities. So, for example, today is Chesed Shebemalchut. We are in the last week before Shavuot, the final countdown, and it's the culmination of all of this counting. And today, in some sense, is really the distillation of Chesed. Chesed is generosity, love, kindness, without any of the constraints of justice. Justice brings in a sense of limit. Chesed is unlimited kindness and love. And I wish that, parenthetically, we had more of that on the streets today in Jerusalem. I wish that Jerusalem Day really was reflecting this moment in the Sphiratic counting, and I'm painfully aware of that asymmetry. And so today, is an opportunity to immerse fully in an unrestricted quality of chesed. It's chesed shebemalchut. Malchut is the vessel of that is this world. This world has no intrinsic quality of its own, but it is a vessel for containing the divine energies. And so the energy of today is especially potent. It is bringing chesed into malchut, into this world. But that's just an example. And if you're living the sphira, the counting of the sphirot, in a Kabbalistic way, in the way that, again, I believe it was intended, you are paying attention in exactly the way you describe, Abdullah. You're paying attention to your own state of being in relation to that divine quality. If it is the day of judgment, well, it's judgment in relation to another sphira, because each week is a particular sphira. we deal with 7 sfirot over 7 weeks. Each day is its own sfirah within a particular sfirah of the week. So you're dealing with an interaction of divine energies, divine qualities. And each combination creates a different opportunity and a different way of looking, examining yourself. How am I really in relationship to the inner quality of this day? And this is really intended to help us on this journey that begins on Pesach with that physical release, that physical sense of liberation, to take on that moment of divine revelation, which is the night of Shavuot, and to more deeply commit yourself to a life of spiritual discipline, whose purpose is greater expansiveness of consciousness, whose purpose is greater inner freedom.
It's really beautiful, Yossi. And even in your brief explanation, I learned so many new things. So I have to say so many different Sheikhianus now. That I am going through some new explorations. One related topic I want to bring up is it's so interesting human weakness that both for Ramadan and Islamic practices and the Jewish ones, we have this tension. Some of our liberal and more progressive and reformist wings of our tradition says, then why do you need these rituals? Let's just go with the moral teachings and try to do this, or let's just get the kind of end result. As long as we try to aspire to morally encourage to get the end result, why do we need these steps and spiritual disciplines and the law? And then our little bit more conservative and from more religious wing says, no, they are more important. I wonder if these are both two wings of the same bird, and it requires both of them. As I think our liberal and reform wings of our tradition should humble themselves, that we are not absolutely clear. It's not scientific lab knowledge that you just quantify these things. And then, and our more conservative and religious wings should really understand, without really taking people to that ethical, moral outcomes, these just acts, rituals, they fall short in pumping that Shekhinah, that God's presence into our lives. So how to achieve this both is my ongoing struggle. I am a religious Muslim. I will do things religiously required, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it doesn't make me dance in the clouds. I'm committed to this. But keep doing this forever if I'm not getting the spiritual feast and the pleasures makes also very difficult to hold this tradition, its richness in its entirety. Do you also go through these struggles?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, this is the first year in many years that it looks like, God willing, I will be making it to the final countdown. I usually give up midway because I find that it's becoming rote and I just lose interest. And so I'm very pleased that this year has been a time of really renewed purpose and self-confrontation, and it comes at a very apt moment for me personally. I really needed to go through this. I can't say that I did the counting. I'm doing the counting in the highest or deepest way that one should, but there have been some good experiences, and those good experiences compensate for those many experiences where I am doing it by rote. And I remind myself, it's like practice. It's like for me as a writer, I have so many days when I sit at the desk and nothing happens, and I mean, I'm producing pages because that's what you have to do, but there's no inspiration. There's no sense of uplift. And the religious life is very much like the life of a writer. It's interior, and And it is, I mean, there's also, of course, a communal component, but I think when you really, what we're talking about is the interior side of religious life. And in that sense, it's very lonely, as being a writer is lonely. But you also know that you have to stick it out. You have to show up at the desk every morning, because you never know when this will be the day when you actually write a good line. You actually write a line that surprises you. And I believe that does come from it comes from that place within, which is not mine. That place that's created in the divine image.
I'm sorry to keep adding, but communal aspect is also incredibly important, especially to our little bit more liberal sides of our tradition. You know, I was always criticizing why these strict, rigid rules and regulations. After spending now my second Ramadan under pandemic all by myself alone, I now realize some of those rules and regulations and rigidity was to keep everybody together, to take this individual journey and make it a collective one. Make you part of a story of a people, or make you part of a story of a narrative of a people. Now I am humbled. Now I can put up, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it annoys me, even if I feel sometimes it's all man-made and women are not honored enough, etc. So I can push in that direction. But I have a much more charitable view of those do's and do nots now, because I need my community. It's very difficult, not impossible, very difficult to practice Islam just by yourself, just dwelling on these ethical moral teachings. You need a sense of community.
Abdullah, I'm very glad you mentioned the communal aspect, because something that struck me so clearly in how both of you described the journey is you focus almost exclusively on the individual and on the personal, which is, of course, meaningful and critical. But I would love for you now to relate to the fact that both of these ritual periods are communal periods as well. And so how does, I mean, anyone who's gone through journeys, you know, I remember I lived in Cairo for a year, and I remember when I celebrated the 50th Shabbat by myself, and I said to myself, there's a phrase from the Torah, lo tov liot adam levado, right? It's not good to be alone. I now understand the reason for community. And so besides, okay, fine, we're all together, can you go back and now relate to this spiritual journey that you described and explain where does it meet the community, not just the individual? So there's this process that you described, rahma and shukr, you know, like gratitude, which is about others, but it can also be very internalized. Is this, everybody does this work in parallel and therefore the community benefits, or is there work that the community does? Yossi, I don't know if you're talking, but we can't hear you. And Abdullah, you opened your microphone. So Yossi, I'm sorry, we're not hearing you.
I think these are not, individual and collective are not as disconnected as it seems. Part of Ramadan, and I suspect many Jewish practices as well, requires that retreat to self. It is a spiritual maintenance. It's a spiritual gym. You need that alone time. Moses in Sinai, Muhammad in Ghar Hira, and Jesus in the desert. Like, there is no way without building individuals, a strong collectives in any sense will never appear. And as I said in many different ways, Ramadan is not about Ramadan per se. It's about the last 11 months and the next 11 months. If you look at Judaism, Christianity, Islam, or even like secular forms of ethics and morality, how do they define ethics? How you treat other people. How do you treat your neighbor? How do you love your neighbor as yourself? Or like, I can give many different examples. Golden rule is one, and in every tradition, Hinduism, Buddhism, it is measured by how you, not how ethical, moral you are, but how ethical, moral you are interacting with your fellow human beings. But in order to make the last 11 months and the next 11 months ethical, you need to take yourself to the service, and you have to fix yourself. You need that individual and alone space towards fixing the collective. But individual is never the end goal. It's not the final zip code that you are supposed to arrive. By working on yourself alone, that you need that individual space, it is to then bring you, because everybody goes through a somewhat similar process. So when you come as a collective, the next 11 months, because God loves individual songs, glorifications, but God loves, as we say in Islam, that collective, that choir, that jama'ah glorification and singing of God's names more.
You know, I think that my experience of this period is the starting point of the journey and the end point are both collective. Pesach, Shavuot, these are experiences that happen to the Jewish people. They have no significance without a collective expression. That's in some ways that's the essence of the meaning of both Pesach and Shavuot. But I have always chafed at the excessive communalism of Judaism, and I'm a very private person, and I crave solitude. I loved lockdown over this last year. I'm sorry to see it go. I really love sitting in my room and just spending hours at my desk. And it's hard for me. Community is hard for me. The Jewish people as an abstract construct is not difficult for me at all. I'm very deeply attached to Jewish history, to the ideas of the Jewish people, but the actual practice of community is hard for me. And I think that one of the things that I love about the Omer is the interiority of the process. And between the starting point and the end point, you go inward. And the Omer really is a private experience I think in its essence. You don't have to count the Omer in a minyan, and you can count it at home. And I take full advantage of that loophole to absolve myself of the intensity of the Jewish communal experience.
As an extrovert, I can't wait this pandemic to end. I am very opposite of my brother. That's why we get along so well. I am not meant to be alone. I don't know what would I do if I'm in an island by myself. But one important aspect of this is you are born into a family and you have to honor that family. You don't choose your parents. Most of us wouldn't choose the ones we have if we have an opportunity. But you stick with that family. But later on, what becomes your community is your friends, people that you choose to be with. Similarly, I am born into Islam. If I come back to work 1,000,000 times, I will always choose Islam as my religion. This is my family, my spiritual family. I will never give up because I love it. It's a beautiful, beautiful frame of reference in experiencing God in life. But I think in the modern age, globalized age, later on, you develop a community beyond your own family without undermining. It's not at the expense of watering down and compromising your family ties. Then you build a sense of community. That's why these conversations are so rich. We are not limited to the family network anymore. We can build a sense of community. That's what my vision of Jerusalem, in one way or another. If God created this incredible universe, but put everything around Jerusalem, it was for a reason that place was supposed to create a reality that will exemplify what ultimate goal of God was in creating us all different in so many different ways. So let's think of community, especially spiritual community, beyond our own particular identities, ethnic, religious, otherwise.
Well, it's interesting because I realize, and this is especially an expression of our spiritual friendship, Abdullah, that I live my religious life, my identity in general, on several levels. The first level is I am in communion with all Jews,
regardless of their religious observance, how secular they are. Anyone who is part of the Jewish story is part of my story and part of my religious experience. I experience my Jewish identity through a religious prism. And as a result of that, anyone who is part of the Jewish story is part of my Jewish experience, whether they personally are religious or not. But I also experience my religious life on another level, and that is I belong to an interfaith people. And this is a very new people that's being formed. This is a people that's being formed really in our time. And I see this as really one of the great spiritual adventures and opportunities that our generation has, which is to have this intimacy with the other, so that the other is no longer another. The other is actually part of my religious experience, and this is extraordinary. And I think that more and more religious people from our various faiths are going to have the variations of these experiences. In our case, Abdullah, I think it's been particularly intense, and I really feel we are part of the same people. And so I live in two peoples simultaneously, and that's a tremendous gift of this.
It's not abstract for me. Like when I go to Aqsa, when I'm under that beautiful dome, before my relationship with you and my close friends in the Jewish community, it was just my experience. It's a spiritual ecstasy that I feel in Aqsa. But now I carry you and many others with me. I know that it's holy for you too. I know that you have that spiritual connection that I have, to that place. So it's not even only in our heads, it's not abstract, it's not conceptual anymore. When I walk into a Muslim space, if that Muslim space and Muslim concept is also somewhat sacred and to be honored, to be celebrated for my Jewish brothers and sisters, I try to honor that. And it makes me a better Muslim. It makes me a better believer. It brings me closer to Almighty. It doesn't compromise my Muslim identity.
You know, Abdullah, one of the most powerful spiritual experiences that I've had was when you and I went together to the cave of Machpelah, as we call it, and to the Mosque of Ibrahim, as Muslims call it, and knowing that you were on the other side of the door. I was in one part of the space, you were in the other, and I felt that you and I were praying together, and I was praying in Hebrew, you were praying in Arabic, but we were making our shared ancestors happy, and it was a very tangible experience. It was nothing abstract. You know, I'm very often wary of this talk of children of Abraham. Yeah, you know, children of Abraham. All right, we know how some families can actually behave. So that doesn't always work. But I really felt a direct lineage experience standing there with you in that place.
Therefore, Jews and Muslims of any kind should be in conversation with one another, but especially religious Jews and religious Muslims. For those who have a traditional connection to Judaism and Islam in one way or another, those people should talk more, and they don't talk enough, regretfully. That religious language, religious connection, that's, as you know, one of the major mental blocks for my community when they try to understand why Jews are so connected to Israel as a state, why they are so connected to that holy land. Not hearing and not experiencing, not receiving that religious tone, that religious connection, that spiritual fulfillment is one of the major mental blocks, regretfully, in my community for a lot of people.
So I want to jump in, and because I want to ask you to fill out the journey Following your, Abdullah, your beautiful call for us to be in conversation, Muslim to Jews be in conversation, that the conversation is rich and going back to the word I used earlier, illuminating, and that is, if we again go back to our juxtaposition of this journey, both journeys come to an end with this moment of this climactic moment, and the moments actually can be in conversation. Of course, in Judaism, as Yossi mentioned, the final moment is Shavuot, and Abdullah, we just passed the day that generally is marked as Laylatul Qadr, the night of power or destiny, which is the first revelation. And so, if you can fill out what happens at the end of the journey for each of you, and what we can learn from each other.
Go ahead, Yossi.
No, Abdullah, you speak.
Not many people would be familiar. The almost Muslim equivalency for Shavuot is Laylatul Qadr, the night of power, which is often, nobody knows the exact time, and that's another mystical teaching. It could be any time of the year, but we think it's in Ramadan. It could be any day of Ramadan, we think it's the 27th. So even if it is or isn't, every Muslim on the 27th of Ramadan, that on the odd day, they act as if it is that climactic moment that we are receiving Quran again after 1400 years. We are expressing our gratitude to Almighty again for the word of God, for the revelation of God. It is really a mountaintop climactic experience. But again, like Moses had those tablets, but he didn't stay there. He came back to his community. What happens in that after that moment is, or Muhammad, when he was taken from Jerusalem to heavens, God offered him, stay here. Don't go. If you understand this figurative or literal, it doesn't matter. That he had the opportunity to live in these heavenly realities. He could have been free from all the shenanigans and the difficulties of his community and life. And if I were him, I would stay, quite honestly. But what happens in that incredible zenith, climactic spiritual pleasure is, there you remember you have a job to do. There you have a moral responsibility and moral imperative that you have to bring these tablets back down to the people of Israel, to your community. Because without that sense of collective responsibility, without trying, you go and see the peace that God established in heavens. Now you have to establish that peace on the face of earth among the children of Israel, Ishmael, and among the children of all Adam and Eve. So what happens is not staying in that spiritual ecstasy. What happens is you charge your spiritual batteries, ethical, moral batteries with those climactic moments, and then you go back to the dirty, painful, ugly, difficult realities of human relations and try to live an ethical, moral life, both individually and collectively.
I'm a little bit wary of taking the analogies between Judaism and Islam too far, because I think that at the end of the day, one needs to not only celebrate the commonalities, but also honor the differences. And the specificity of each faith is an essential part to interreligious dialogue, which doesn't always get expressed in the well-intentioned enthusiasms of interfaith partners. And having said that, I will answer your question, Raquel, which is, I think that there's a really interesting, which I hadn't thought of until listening to you, Abdullah, but there is an interesting kind of analog between Ramadan and Shavuot in particular, which is these are both holidays that celebrate divine revelation, that celebrate the giving of sacred scripture. And the inner meaning for me of both of these experiences is that God is intimately involved with our lives. and that God does not abandon us. God does not abandon humanity, and that there really is a plan. There's a roadmap. When we talk about journeys, humanity is on a journey. There's an end point. Islam believes that. Judaism believes that. Christianity believes that. And all of these faiths are revelatory faiths. This is, and I'm saying that without for a moment intending to downgrade the major faiths of the East, which is a whole other conversation. But I have learned immensely from the faiths of the East. They've nourished me, and I feel this enormous debt to the East. And I also think that on some level, the next stage of interfaith relations, maybe a generation or two after Islam and Judaism have worked out our problems, maybe the revelatory faiths, the faiths that believe that God presented Scripture, Holy Scripture, will be able to dialogue with those faiths that have a different view of reality. But this notion that God not only is involved with our lives, but God actually cares enough to give us a blueprint. And then you can do with that blueprint, as you like. You can follow it, you can not follow it, you can interpret it, how you interpret. And then the history of our religions is how we then interpret this blueprint. But we share that deep faith in a living divine presence. And if it happened once before, or twice, or three times, however one wants to play this out, it can happen again, and it will happen again. That's the hope of these moments that we've carried for centuries, for millennia.
Going back to your point, Yossi, about the commonalities and the differences, which I wholeheartedly agree with. When you think about these two revelatory moments, I find that the enactment of Laylat al-Qadr, this night of destiny, what's so exquisite about it is it's the beginning of revelation. And what's distinctive about the Islamic notion of revelation is that this moment, which could or could not, but perhaps is in Ramadan, is it ushers in a period, not a moment, not an instant of the skies opening and here's this one moment, but it opens up a period of what, according to Muslim tradition, is 23 years. Of a revelatory relationship between God and the Prophet Muhammad. Now, why is that interesting for a Jew? Because when you use that and you again juxtapose it back into the tradition, you actually see that that's true about Sinai, and that Sinai is both this moment outside all moments, this time that becomes eternal time, but really also ushers in a period, a revelatory period, where God is in conversation with Moses, with Moshe, in an open-ended way until the rest of Moshe's life. And so this comparison allows us to take another look at our own tradition and to see it from a different lens, that the distinctiveness then inspires us to look again and to enable this conversation. Now, with that, I'm mindful of all the people who want to ask questions, and so I want to be generous about the last. Let's take a few more minutes, and I encourage both of you to open up the chats and read, because there are many compliments and there are many people who have been moved by your friendship and the precious way that you speak with each other and to each other, which is such a model for how these conversations can happen, and why we're so grateful that you're having this conversation with us. And while you're taking a look, I want to ask some of the people who are asking specific questions. Julie asks, does Ramadan influence the awareness of nationality or community identification and then heightened it, especially among extremists? Similarly, does the Omer period do that as well? I think that's...
Both religion or Islam in general and religious periods and holidays and days of observation in particular, they have a potential to lift up, usher people to heavenly realities, empower them to ascend and go beyond their national, ethnic, religious citizenship identities, or do the opposite. It's so the ambivalence of the sacred. It can make you the most universalist, loving, caring person. It can make you as evil, as exclusionary, as unwelcoming as possible. So I am not answering your question directly, but there are elements within Islam. I think in every religion, during these days of observation, forces you to set up and rearrange your priorities and make your human identity as the ultimate identity. All the identities, including your religious and national identities, come after being good human. Or you could do the opposite. You could really entrench you in the narrow, confined understanding of national, even chauvinistic tendencies, regretfully, what you see in some parts of the world. Both is possible. So then the responsibility is not in the religion. The responsibility is not in Ramadan or counting of the Omer. Responsibility is which side of that religion, which power of that religion will be allowed to nurture the souls or corrupt the souls. Responsibility is within us.
Yossi?
You know, it's a very painful question today because what we're seeing in the streets of Jerusalem is exactly this problem. I'll speak on the Jewish side. The confluence of extreme nationalism and religion is being played out right now on the streets. And nationalism is not only a legitimate part of Judaism, it's an essential part. We're a people, we have a national expression. That national expression preserved us in our dispersion. It is responsible for the extraordinary, almost literally unbelievable return of the Jewish people from all around the world to this point of earth. And yet it is also being expressed today in some ways in its ugliest forms, in its most provocative and triumphalist forms. And I'm thinking specifically about the kids who dance through the Muslim quarter waving giant Israeli flags. Now, fortunately, the most recent report that I saw showed that the Israeli police have decided to reroute the march for security reasons. I wish, though, Abdullah, that there was a decision that was made here on the highest levels to reroute the march, not just for security reasons, but to respect the sensibilities of our neighbors. And that our celebration doesn't have to be experienced by our neighbors as a taunt, which is really what comes through in the what we call the parade of the flags. And so how do we honor our national existence? How does religion temper nationalism? How does religion instill a more humble form of nationalism, rather than incite the uglier expressions of nationalism? That's our particular challenge on this particular day.
So we could stop here, but I feel that it would be more meaningful if we answer one more question, and that is a question about mystical Islam and is there an this is the phrasing of the question: is there an equivalent to the Kabbalistic terminology and framework that Yossi described in the Omer? in Islam. And the reason why I want to end on this note is because this is a hard day. And someone asked, are any of you in Jerusalem? 2 of us are in Jerusalem right now. And I know a lot of people are from Jerusalem and have their hearts in Jerusalem. And so let's yes, there was just a rocket siren here.
And that's what it was, a rocket siren.
I think it was. But Abdullah, let us, why don't you let us end on a note of inspiration from an extraordinarily rich tradition of mystical Islam, about Ramadan, about this journey.
Not only we have a similar mystical spiritual tradition called Sufism. Not only we have this rich, incredibly rigorous spiritual practices that you see in Kabbalah exist among Sufis, those who are involved in tasawwuf, in the mystical tradition of Islam. For centuries, the Kabbalists and the Sufis, they informed each other. They are influenced from one another. Because in that mystical realm, which is beyond law, beyond, again, this is not to put Judaism and Islam through the pots of Sufism and Kabbalah so that they can emerge into one religion. I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about serious Jews and serious Muslims. There were periods of time in Safat, in Andalus, in other places, where they brought these spiritual and mystical traditions in conversation with one another. And they found an overarching language to praise God without compromising their uniqueness or distinct identities as Jews and Muslims. However, I have to caution, we can't be selective for our own tradition or the tradition of other people. We cannot just glorify just the mystical sides, and we shouldn't do that at the expense. We can't be at the expense of the whole tradition, or we shouldn't be seeing journey to faith as a shopping cart. You just like what you like. You just take what you like and leave everything else on the shelf. It's not how it works in the tradition. In a way, Sufism is the soul of Islam, but there's a body of Islam. There's a heart of Islam. There's a brain of Islam. All of it, when they function harmoniously with one another, that's you see the ultimate. To say only Kabbalist Judaism is better and peaceful, the rest of the Judaism is not, is such a disservice, such an inaccurate, irresponsible statement to make. Yes, Islam invites people to go through the beyond the do's and do nots, beyond the halals and harams, beyond the actions. And that's best explained and that's best articulated in the tradition of Sufism, which you know a lot about. And I'm so proud of National Library of Israel that they are now putting out so many resources of Islamic tradition, Islamic heritage of the Holy Land. And this is for you to benefit, for people of Israel, citizens of Israel, to take this as an opportunity and learn a little bit more beyond the headlines of the news and etc. But as I said in English before, I really, really hope we will go beyond these difficult days and we will emerge as faithful and moral people. And we are not going to let these difficult and painful chapters of this current moment to shape who we are and who we want to be. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Imam Abdullah. Thank you. Yossi, final words, Yossi?
Oh, I think Abdullah spoke for me as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Be safe.
People are asking resources. Please look at the website of the library and reach out to Dr. Ukeles and what she's trying to do there. I think she's underselling herself. Through the work of library, she's resurrecting so much beautiful things from the past, but also even adding so many rich opportunities for contemporary Israeli society.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone. Ramadan Kareem.
Blessings to you all. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. And please be safe.
Ramadan Mubarak and Chag Sameach.